Wayne Creedle, Benny Gates, Philip Hart, Yana James, Dave Johannes,
Yep.
Preston Lloyd, Eric Mai, Charles Menges,
Here.
Jennifer Mullen, Kendra Norrell, Casey Overton, Michelle Parrish, Maritza Beechin, Councilwoman Robertson, Brian White, Charlie Wilson.
Here.
I've received 3 requests for virtual participation from Eric Mai, Jennifer Mullen, and Mr. Creedle. So we'll need to unmute them, Marianne. And Mr. Mai, I'll start with you. Can you please state the reason why you're requesting to participate virtually and where you'll be participating from?
I'll be participating from my home in Richmond, Virginia. I'm requesting this virtual setting because my wife just welcomed a new baby 3 weeks ago. So we're just dealing with kids throughout the house. So it'd be helpful to attend virtually. Thank you.
Understood, and congratulations. Hope mom and baby are doing well. So we'll just need a motion to allow Mr. Mai to participate virtually.
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Ms. Mullen, can you please state why you're requesting to participate virtually and where you'll be participating from?
Yes, I am out of town in Kentucky and requesting virtual participation.
Great, thank you. We'll just need a motion to accept Mrs. Mullen's request.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Mr. Creedle, could you please state why you are requesting to participate virtually and where you are participating from?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everybody. I am participating from my home in Richmond. I am not feeling well today, so I would love to be with you guys, but I can't.
Understood. If you feel better soon, can we get a motion for Mr. Creedle?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. We could just let the record reflect that Ms. Beechin has joined us. So thank you all for joining us today. As a reminder, the Advisory Council is a subcommittee of the City Planning Commission, and we're charged with advising the Planning Commission, the Department of Planning and Development Review, and the consultant team in the zoning ordinance revision process. The public will have an opportunity to speak during the public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. Please note that the timeline on the agenda has been modified to allow more time for public comment as we are anticipating a need for that. And as a reminder to members of the advisory committee, please speak up so that those online can hear you and state your name when you're beginning your comments so that those participating virtually know who's commenting. So, Marianne, we do have an official quorum now. Since we're online, we have that somewhere.
We need a quorum in the room.
Okay, so we won't be able to approve the June meeting notes. So we'll just have to pause that for now and maybe take that up at the next meeting if we don't have a quorum in the room. So with that, we'll move over to our public comment time. And this is an opportunity for members of the public in person and online to offer comments on items that are not on today's agenda. Because of the length of the agenda, we are going to keep public comments to 3 minutes per person. So we'll go ahead and start with those in the room that would like to offer public comment. Please come forward, offer your name, and the floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Mitch Burton. Thank you for the time to come speak. I'm a resident of the city at 1600 West Gray Street. My wife and I are raising a young family there, and my comments are offered from that perspective. First, I just want to state I understand the desire for density along Broad Street, especially with Pulse corridor is, and I understand that. I don't have any objection to the north side of Broad, seeing buildings approaching 13 stories high. I do live on the north side of West Grace, and I do have concerns with 6-story buildings being in the same alley that the house where I live. And I don't know, your alley neighbors are very intimate. And I think my concerns would be typical of ones you would hear. I'm concerned about loss of sunlight, noise, and loss of privacy. I did note in some of the documents that there was at one time a MX4 mixed use. I assume it means 4 stories. And I think that should be the standard for when you have a mixed zone abutting against the neighborhood. And then finally, also want to address the block of 1100 West Gray Street, which I think has been zoned as mix 8. I don't think there is a current business on the 1100 block of West Gray Street. I also want to note that as someone who drives down it every day, it is hazardous. Oftentimes, folks have hazards on. And you got to drive the yellow line, go across the yellow line to get by. And safety would also be a concern. Thank you for the time, and that's all I have to share. Appreciate it.
Speakers? Hi.
Good afternoon. My name is Chuck Dupree. I am president of the Greater Fulton Civic Association and also president of Innovate Fulton, a community development corporation with a mission to revitalize the commercial corridor in Fulton Hill. I'm noticing that it looks like initial proposals, and my background, by the way, is in planning and economic development, consulted approximately 300 communities around the country. And I speak on any number of neighbors that have called me with a concern about proposal that really doesn't speak to the need for density in our commercial corridor. Right now, it looks like the proposal calls for a mixed use 3. And that doesn't seem appropriate at a corridor where 10,000 cars a day literally are passing by on Williamsburg Road. So it would seem we really need to somehow increase the density. Mixed use 8 may be more appropriate. I'll leave that to folks in the room. But somehow we need to infuse additional density into that area. And with that, I will sit down and be brief. And thank you for letting me speak.
Hi, my name is Morgan Hafer. I'm founder of the Henry Place Neighborhood Area Association. I'm a former bike courier. I've traveled the world on very little money, and I've seen a lot of things happen on very little money on a blue collar budget. While I've seen the city spend billions over decades on these ideas and these fantasies about building things for high density housing and development, when we have Carytown that is being ignored simply because it could be the car-free retail corridor that it's dying to be, like any other city, including, let's see, Falls Church, DC. I mean, there's New York City, which I lived in New York City before there was bike lanes. There is no question as to why the city installed bike lanes, why the city has bathrooms with parks in them, or sorry, parks with bathrooms in them, is maintaining the parks and the things that the city has instead of calling on developers and in a zoning department to fix Richmond, when Richmond can't fix itself the way it's been run. We have giveaways to NFL teams, like a school that was supposed to be a bond secures office park, but is a retail space for what? Not Richmonders. It's unaffordable housing and retail. This building, the terminal, bus terminal, which has been ignored for 15 years or so. The skaters here in Richmond, who I don't think any of you talk to, but I do, because I ride my bike daily for the city and I interact with the community. The skaters for the last 15 years have taken their time and money, even though they don't live in the area, and put in skate measures. And this is at the tip of the Capitol Trail, by the way, which is a nonprofit, the Richmond Cycling Corps. It's a nonprofit, reaches out to inner city youth and provides bicycling training and education. And it's basically a high-risk youth outreach program. And they have a nonprofit bike shop in a storage trailer, basically a storage container, the big like shipping containers. They've turned it into a bike shop, and it's at the foot of the Capitol Trail, which I don't know how many cities you've developed, sir, or ridden a bike in, but Richmond's not on the list because 10,000 people drive by it. It's on the list because it's easy and cheap for people to live elsewhere and come in here, or cheaper than it would be pay for the private schools the schools are ignored. We have vacant schools that could be community centers and, again, high-risk outreach things for the youth. I don't have children, but I went to the Richmond Public Schools. In fact, the elementary school that's sitting vacant because apparently it's cheaper to sit vacant than educate the youth that are going to the middle school of the same name 2 blocks away. So I would urge, before we give more permits, more special use projects, and just billions to developers, I mean, we consider what Manchester is what we're doing with Manchester right now, which is we're considering a $14 million park for the Manchester residents and the developers who didn't what? And our permits office who didn't put specifications or demands on developers to put annex space for green space for families, for recreation, for outdoor concerts and things. And we're supposed to pay for that now, but we're supposed to pay for it while overlooking the fact that the city's ignored the 14th Street Bridge, which has been deemed structurally unsafe. So yeah, high-rise housing. Yeah, it's a dream for anybody who's not living in the city right now or can't afford high-rise housing or isn't happy with a backyard and a fence and neighbors. You know, that's these ideas are fantasies, and I know because we have a brand new amphitheater that doesn't have enough parking for the people. But what about the empty amphitheater that's sitting over there at the Richmond Raceway for the last 20 years? What about that? How come that wasn't developed? How come we're not developing the things that we developed and then we just neglect and forget about, so that some next administration can come along and either fix it or, hey, let's build something new, like a baseball stadium that the Atlanta Braves left this city a long time ago because it wasn't economically viable, and we renovated their stadium. So before we get on this idea of mass people, high density housing, you're going to have to fix some things here to make people want to come and live in the city and bring high density housing. Because me personally, as a retired, I'm on disability.
Sir, could you address that?
Yes, I'm trying, but I'm a person of these people. So I want everybody to be clear and understand me. And so if I had a choice, I would leave the city in a heartbeat, but I can't because there's nowhere else that's affordable. And the reason this city is affordable is because the great zoners, planners, and people who've left things like the 6th Street Marketplace as a legacy for us to remember, those of us who can remember it, but it's gone now. You know, the bathroomless walk. Yeah, of course I've got time. It's a democracy. Of course I don't have time to speak. But, you know, like bathrooms, permits, things to develop the people from the bottom to the top. Because see, the top down, the trickle down isn't working, in case you people with money haven't noticed. I mean, it's not working. It's just not. And it's getting harder and harder. And you want to crunch us further by making our neighbors, you know, have high-rise houses who are millionaires while we have to pay the millionaire taxes and look at all the things that we can afford. Wow, because you guys have rezoned and said, oh, we need to change things here. What you need to change is what's been going on historically, which is the corruption and the DPW who's doing things like bicycle projects. You can't have one competent bike lane in this entire city. In 10 years, millions of dollars. There you go. Thank you very much, everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Jones. I'm with an organization called the Community Climate Collaborative, C3 for short. We're an organization that focuses on local community-based climate solutions that improves the everyday lives of community members. I just want to take my time today to highlight the importance of allowing for denser development and taller buildings especially around transit corridors. Particularly because it plays an important role when we're thinking about our climate goals and our equity goals as a city. I think with denser development and taller buildings, it allows for our neighborhoods to be better connected and improves our communities by providing more opportunities for our residents to work and play more comfortably, no matter where you live in the city. And yeah, I think it's also important to note that denser zoning can also allow opportunities to improve our energy efficiency efforts as well, which also allows us to reduce our emissions. So all around, it's kind of a win-win, improving the everyday lives of community members, the quality of life for community members, while also allowing us to reach these important climate goals that we need to reach. And I feel like recent events, extreme weather events are only becoming more and more popular as we've seen through the years. So it's important for us to take any steps that we can to reach those. So that's all for me today. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks to the Zoning Advisory Committee, city staff, the consultants. My name is Joe Gelbach. I'm a co-lead with RVA YIMBY. We're a group of neighbors who are supporting more housing choices, more housing options in all areas of the city. And that includes advocating here at this committee for more housing across Richmond. So I'm here to express strong support for expanding housing options, ending the exclusion of duplexes, triplexes, and other modest multifamily homes is essential if we're serious about addressing the racial and economic segregation that's entrenched in Richmond's current zoning code. This is a critical opportunity to move toward a more inclusive city, one where all neighborhoods contribute to housing access and affordability. I'd also like to ask whether the city has, and I don't expect an answer to this now, but I'm curious if the city has analyzed how the draft zoning map changes the numbers of homes allowed compared to the current zoning, and specifically by neighborhood income level. Where are we allowing more density versus where we're not? Is there an equity analysis being done there? And finally, I want to acknowledge the truth about public input and public comment. Research shows, and despite our best intentions, so definitely please don't take this as an impugnment upon the work that you all are doing. Public meetings like this aren't as democratic as we hope they are. Again, research has consistently shown that people who attend and testify tend to be older, more affluent, more likely to be homeowners than the population at large. This doesn't mean that their voices don't matter by any stretch of the imagination, but it does mean that the voices that you hear in these rooms are most oftentimes not representative of the entire community. No matter how loud or intense some comments are, keep in mind who isn't in the room. Renters, working people, people living with housing insecurity, younger residents, folks who can't afford to live in this city also have a stake in Richmond's future. So thank you for your time, and we'll be there.
My name's Copeland Casati. I live on West Gray Street. We are a vibrant community of renters, affordable housing, group homes, and homeowners. West Gray Street is along the Pulse Corridor. And if you remember, there were some negotiations and commitments that zoning gave to our neighborhood and community. As you discuss upzoning and assure people that you're just upzoning one step, y'all already did that. For South of Broad, we want vibrant density, but it must not block existing thriving communities' resources. As you know, West Grace is row homes. They're long, they're narrow, they're sort of thoughtfully placed. And we want you to uphold your commitment to Soul Smart and health and vibrancy of communities and not block our sunlight with density. As density height increases, those shadows go up to 4 times over neighboring communities. And that is unacceptable on Gray Street. It will affect our energy efficiency. And by the way, I am in an energy efficiency background. I have a career in passive solar design. And data shows the emerging impacts on lack of sunlight, on energy efficiency, and our health. So we are just hoping that the Zoning Advisory Committee will remember that they've already given us a commitment and that they will abide by it. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Bryant. I am a co-lead with RVA YIMBY and a resident of the 7th District. Yeah, I'm here to advocate in favor of density, expanded housing options. Some of us were raised in Richmond. Some of us moved here a long time ago. Some of us moved here just a little bit ago. And the city changed. It adapted itself. It opened its arms to allow us to live here. They extended grace in welcoming us. And in my opinion, it's short-sighted and counterproductive and unacceptable to then turn around and say, no, we don't want more people. We don't want density. We don't want more people to live here. Or to say, yes, you can live here, but only if you can afford a home that's gotten really expensive because of our outdated zoning code. Especially many of the people who live here wouldn't be able to afford the same home if they were looking to buy today. Richmond has a lot of exclusion in its history. We've made a lot of exclusive decisions, and now's a chance for our future to be more inclusive, to make Richmond a place where anyone can live, where anyone can live affordably, and where we can live in housing, different types of housing that meets the different needs that we have at different stages of our lives. So I support increasing density, especially near transit corridors. I support allowing duplexes in all areas of the city, as well as I live in Shockoe Bottom, making the area of Shockoe Bottom mixed use having 6 stories, a six story height at least, to take advantage of the resources and the potential that neighborhood has. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience? That would like to say?
Hi, my name is Sarah Wiziger. I live in an apartment in the Museum District. I believe the draft zoning map does not go far enough to increase density in the first district. For example, take the node at Devil's Triangle, the area near Park and Patterson Avenues where they meet. Currently, the triangle has retail, restaurants, and lots of multifamily housing nearby. There's a 7-story apartment nearby. There's a massive amount of often unused surface parking in every direction from the triangle. And I'm requesting that the zoning for this area and others like it incentivizes commercial and more multifamily. It would be a lost opportunity if the zoning, as proposed in the current draft, would basically allow for super expensive 3-story townhomes on these parking lots. I don't believe that the result would reflect the spirit of Richmond 300 plan. Also, I strongly support zoning for duplexes and ADUs, as well as triplexes in all residential districts in the city. As a senior who's a renter without a car, I'd like more options to live in more walkable neighborhoods. You may not hear from too many people who rent houses and apartments, but as the majority of the people in the city, we are out here. The zoning recommendations that you make will matter to all of us. Thank you for your time.
My name is Melissa Savinko. I am a resident of the FAN. I am the chair of the FDA zoning committee. I also am a lifetime resident of Richmond, grew up here, went to Richmond Public School, and own a business. I sell real estate full-time for a living. We are hearing a lot about density, and while I agree that additional equitable density is important, I have not heard much today about affordable housing. And my understanding was one of the purposes of this, one of the main directions of this is affordable housing. And some of the things that are being done with the zoning map will actually eliminate affordable housing, not create it. As an example, you're proposing additional density on the corridor from the Henrico County line on Chamberlain Avenue all the way to Brooklyn Park Boulevard. Currently, that entire stretch, for the most part, is garden style, up to 3-story type apartments that are affordable, that are on bus lines, that are close to downtown. There's additionally area beyond Brooklyn Park Boulevard towards the interstate, which is currently industrial, which is being zoned additionally industrial. I would like to see there be protections for existing affordable housing. If you zone that area, RX4 and MX6, you're giving incentives for people to tear those buildings down. I would also like to see there be additional zoning for people to own homes. I have 3 children, 28, 28, and 24. I would love for them to be able to own a home in Richmond one day. Right now, that does not appear to be an option. So I'm not sure why we are zoning existing industrial land that is close to downtown transportation, bus lines, and other resources as industrial. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ted Leffler. I'm also a resident of the FAN. I'm here to speak in favor of more housing options and greater density because there won't be enough affordable housing until there's enough housing, point blank. And if the city wants to pursue its economic justice goals, equity goals, environmental housing, and transit justice, all of those are would be supported by a zoning map that allows for as much housing as possible. In addition to helping the city, have enough economic activity and enough residents to be able to continue to fund critical city and public services going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience like to offer comments? Yes, sir. Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, I'm William Johnson. I live in North Barton Heights. I'm part of the Civic Association there. I'd like to speak to those that are in favor of the density, specifically the density that this program's been talking about for months now. The densities we're talking about is not affordable. You're dealing with developers that are going to come in and build these huge apartments, and then they're going to turn around and to meet their cap rates, they're going to set these prices high. All across the United States, these buildings are being built and they're letting them sit empty because it's just as profitable for these developers to let it sit empty than to drop the rates. If they drop the rates, then the values of their buildings come down. They don't want that. So I just want you to really think about this before you open the door. Because when they come in and they set that rate, they'll let those buildings sit empty. And the affordable, someone spoke up a little while ago, they said that the affordable buildings that we have now will be displaced. They'll be gone. Those are the buildings that people are going to come after. And the owners of these landlords that are slumlords that own a lot of these buildings, they're sitting there waiting for the big payoff. They're waiting for the zoning to pass so that they can sell it to the developer, make big money, and get out of the slumlord business. So I really want y'all to consider that when you're setting these high rises up in our neighborhoods, setting our neighborhoods up for failure. Because when you rezone it and you allow them to come in and build something bigger and better than what's there is not going to be there anymore and it won't be affordable. So each of these properties that are being taken out, especially in North Barton Heights, we take care of our people over there. We have drug rehab areas and homes. We have old folks' homes. We have low-income housing all up and down. We have a lot of Section 8. Who knows where Section 8's going after this big, beautiful bill that just got passed? So you need to really slow down and think about where these buildings are going to be built. You're putting them inside our neighborhoods. You're destroying the foundation that we've built for our neighbors, the ones that can't afford to buy in the neighborhood. So we've made it to where they can live in the neighborhood. And I think that this is just a way to axe that away, one property at a time, one developer at a time. That's all I got to say.
Audience? We'll move to online comment this time.
One more.
Sorry, yeah.
Hello, my name is Jen Summers. I'm a resident of the 6th District and I live in Providence Park specifically. I'm with RVA YIMBY and Strong Towns RVA that both advocate for denser development and more equitable housing options. I came to the open house event that was held and I really enjoyed that and I was able to provide some comments. I just wanted to reiterate them here, but I also wanted to second Joe from RVA YIMBY's comments about the importance of doing an equity analysis and understanding where new homes are being added versus the income of that area. And I really agree with, I don't know, but yeah, your comments about density and the importance of reducing emissions and the benefits of denser housing being less of an impact on the climate. In my neighborhood, Meadowbridge is a major thoroughfare, and the maps that I was seeing, it isn't being invested in terms of being a transportation corridor. And I think that would be really impactful because a lot of folks there do rely on the bus, and not all the bus stops are particularly safe and well appointed in that area. In addition, Northside in general is a food desert. A lot of folks, especially in that eastern part of Northside, have poor access to a grocery store. So if there's options for zoning where we can bring in a grocery store in that part of town, I think that would make a really big impact on those communities. And the last thing I'll say is I really have a lot of empathy for folks who've lived here all their lives and are struggling to afford to stay in their homes and age in place, as they say. I know that might not be something that's easily, addressed in the format of zoning, but it's a consideration that I wanted to bring to the table. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room before we move to online comment? Okay. Marianne.
We have 5 people online. I'm gonna unmute Samantha Kenny.
Okay, Samantha Kenny. You go ahead and we're going to unmute you. You can offer your comments.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. My name is Samantha Kenny. I serve as the Government Affairs Director at the Richmond Association of Realtors. I'm here today to express our strong support for the city's zoning code rewrite. This process is long overdue. Richmond's current zoning code is outdated, overly complex, and no longer reflects the needs of our growing and evolving city. It limits the types of housing that can be built, restricts density in walkable areas, and contributes to rising housing costs. The proposed rewrite offers a more flexible and modern framework that supports increased housing options while also maintaining neighborhood character. We are especially supportive of key pro-density provisions in the current draft, that being allowing more by-right development in more residential zones, which will increase housing diversity and affordability in all parts of Richmond without requiring burdensome approvals, and reducing minimum lot sizes, which lowers barriers to development and makes better use of available land, particularly in high-demand areas close to transit. Changes are essential to addressing our city's housing shortage, promoting affordability and giving more Richmonders the opportunity to live where they want. As realtors, we understand the connection between housing supply and housing opportunity. This zoning rewrite is a critical step towards a more equitable, sustainable, and accessible Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sam Runner.
Sam Runner, you want to unmute yourself? Or you good?
Should be able to.
Sam Runner, you can unmute yourself and offer your comments.
Sam, now you can.
Okay, Sam, now you should be able to. I apologize. Okay, Sam, hang tight for us. We're gonna move to the next speaker and work on your access and we'll come back to you. You try somebody else.
Chris Alexander.
Chris Alexander, do you wanna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Alexander. I'm Richmond born and raised. I spent the last 10 years working in New York City, where I live in a 6th-floor walk-up in the middle of Manhattan, around 100,000 people in a square mile. It's safe to say I love density. I own a house in Richmond in District 1, 23226. Currently renting it out to good friends. It's a single-family home. I spent the last 10 years working in real estate development, real estate finance, and now construction. I want to offer my concerns to the lack of guardrails in the blanket zoning proposal. I have seen firsthand how developers real estate professionals, mortgage professionals, go into communities with profit in mind. It's something that when I saw the map, my eyes lit up with dollar signs and fear. So I'd like to advocate for a bit more of an incremental approach, one that carves out protections for well-built historic housing stock. I believe there are also some environmental concerns around that. And just ask everyone in the room to consider what your neighborhoods and what your homes look like when they become spreadsheets to investors, to multi-million, multi-billion-dollar real estate conglomerates, private equity funds, REITs, and the like. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
We have Danielle Smith.
Danielle Smith.
Hi, thank you for the time to speak. My name is Danielle Smith, and I'm a renter living in Northside. Although I've worked in housing policy and research spaces since 2018, I'm primarily addressing you today just as a resident who is deeply concerned about affordability and the ongoing issues of gentrification and displacement within the city of Richmond. I would strongly urge the Zoning Advisory Council to consider housing through a racial and economic equity lens. If we as a community are not considering the needs of those neighbors who are already most burdened by housing costs, then we are directly undermining the city's own goals around inclusive growth as outlined in the Richmond 300 plan. This conversation needs to be had throughout the zoning process, and I worry that the city is not adequately considering these factors. From my perspective as a resident, a lot of the focus of the zoning code refresh seems to be on where the city will encourage or discourage development. New housing development is often cited as an important piece of the puzzle in terms of bringing affordable residential units online, and I'm definitely not here to argue with that, nor do I oppose development generally. However, in talking to my friends and neighbors about the zoning redesign, a common theme that comes up is that it's getting harder to afford to live here. At a time when wage growth isn't keeping up with rent inflation, this is a serious issue for a lot of Richmonders, to include those who make the city so diverse and vibrant to begin with. I've attended several of the zoning events in recent weeks, so I would consider myself to be a fairly informed and engaged citizen. It's deeply unlikely that the solution to the housing crisis we are all facing is to reinforce a pattern of allowing wealthier, majority white neighborhoods to opt out of growth, while neighborhoods that are home to communities of color and lower income residents should have to continue to shoulder the burden alone of real estate speculation and resulting displacement. Building new luxury apartments without any affordability requirements in historically redlined areas is a form of subsidized housing, but in a way that benefits those who already have more resources while leaving more housing insecure residents behind. There are some really exciting tools coming into play in other cities with similarly strained housing markets. For example, the city of Louisville, Kentucky recently passed an ordinance that requires developers seeking city subsidies to calculate their proposed project's community displacement risk using an evidence-based assessment. This is something that Richmond could also explore if we're willing to have conversations around housing affordability. We should not delay discussions on housing affordability and displacement. These issues are very urgent and central to our city. And this is more than just a regulatory issue or a planning question. It's also a matter of equity and civil rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, Kevin C.
Kevin C., you want to offer your comments?
Hi, folks. Can you all hear me okay?
You can hear you.
Perfect. Good afternoon, ZAC members. My name is Kevin Cianfarini. I'm a concerned resident of the Fulton neighborhood here today to talk about how we should be better using code refresh as an opportunity to offer people of all races and classes and areas of the city more equity. I believe that neighborhoods which are sparsely populated and experience a particularly high amount of privilege, like west of 195, for example, should be welcoming more people specifically in an effort to alleviate resident displacement in other areas of the city, but a little bit more on that later. To contextualize my comment, I'd first like to travel back in time to 1930s Richmond. The federal government had just introduced a concept called redlining through the Homeowners Loan Corporation. For those unfamiliar, redlining was a racist and classist financial practice of withholding financial services like mortgages from working class and people of color. Predominantly Black neighborhoods were denied financial investment throughout one of the most oppressively and structurally racist policies in recent American history. The University of Richmond has a great historical record of how these policies were applied in Richmond, and I'd like to highlight the gruesome rationale for designations within a few neighborhoods. In Jackson Ward, quote, the population was decreasing because of demolition to save taxes and was thus redlined. The Randolph neighborhood was categorized as declining because, quote, I want to emphasize, quote, the school for white children was in a Negro area. It wasn't until the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968 that redlining was outlawed, meaning that primarily communities of color saw 33 years of systemic disinvestment. In contrast, neighborhoods which are currently home to some of the highest proportion of white and wealthy residents like Windsor Farms, West Hampton, and Westover Hills were not redlined. These areas retained access to financial services, and that echoes into the demographics and land use policies we see today. The 2020 census, 52 years after redlining was outlawed, highlights that Windsor Farms is currently occupied by 94.2% white residents, West Hampton is occupied by 88.4% white residents, and Westover Hills is occupied by roughly 82% white residents, just to name a few. Unsurprisingly, simply repealing a policy that mandated racist land use policies for decades did not magically fix the problem. Later in the 1950s, historians recount that Interstate 95 was routed through Jackson Ward, a previously thriving Black community with racist intentions. The decision to sever a community displaced 7,000 residents and polluted the airs for those left behind. Richmond is still dealing with these scars 70 years later, and remediating some of this harm is identified as a big move in the Richmond 300 Master Plan. Finally, in 1970s Richmond, the city annexed large portions of Chesterfield County to retain white control in City Hall. This spawned a Supreme Court case against Richmond and our resulting mini electoral college system for mayoral elections as a result. Less well understood is that the annexed areas contain some of the most exclusive, sparse, and white areas within the city to date. Likewise, in 1970s,
about 30 seconds left.
Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Fulton was bulldozed to the ground and displaced thousands of Black residents. The brief history brings us to the point I want to make. The city's current zoning code was directly born out of multiple decades of explicitly racist land use policies that hit their crescendo in the 1970s. The folks you hear today advocating for less density during this code refresh, particularly from sparsely populated and privileged areas, may be well-intentioned. However, they are advocating for the continuation of racist mistakes in our collective American history. We must be bold during this rewrite to allow dense and affordable housing in already opportunity-rich areas. Ignoring these facts will not only perpetuate past mistakes, but will further worsen today's displacement problem in other neighborhoods like where I live in Fulton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin Litterist.
Justin Litterist, you want to unmute yourself and offer your comments?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, as they said, my name is Justin Litterist. I'm the former Museum District Association Capital Projects Chair and board member. I'm a lifetime RVA resident. I currently own a duplex on the 2900 block of West Grace. Today, I represent a contingent of property owners and renters in delivering our concerns. Our neighbors and I have invested heavily in our homes, focusing on restoring 100-plus-year-old buildings while maintaining historical features that make our neighborhood great. When I bought my house, there were bars on my windows, and since then, we've seen great progress in the area, resulting in lower crime, increased development, and increased density. However, in line with the comments shared during this meeting, we have concerns related to West Gray Street and Broad Street zoning near the MDA. It is currently being proposed that our block should be changed to Mixed Use 3, and the block behind us should be changed to Mixed Use 13. We are the only block on West Grace that MX3 west of Stewart has this zoning under the proposed plan and are concurrently zoned as R6. Our ask is for West Grace to remain residential. There are currently no businesses on our block, and we would like to remain as such. Additionally, we also ask that the side of West Broad that borders the MDA be limited to lower maximum stories versus the current proposals to limit the impact on the Museum District neighborhood and remain in line with the MDA's design guidelines. 13-floor buildings would eliminate the ability for houses to use solar energy, as mentioned earlier, in addition to the impacts and the enjoyment of our property. We believe that there are many areas that we can increase density in Richmond without these impacts, but we should also continue to work to preserve the neighborhoods where possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sam Runner, we're going to try to come back to you. Thanks for your patience. Sam, are you able to unmute yourself?
If they're on a browser, they might want to press, I think it was Control Space Bar. That's what worked for me. I think it's a browser issue.
Sam, I see you've come up.
Are you able to hear me?
Okay, Sam, can you hear us? Oh,
you have
Wait.
to.
Like, let me push the button.
Okay, we can hear you. So
You can hear me. Okay, excellent. Yes, I would very much like to share my comments. Hi, my name is Sam Runner. I'm a resident of Richmond living in Chaco Bottom. I just wanted to quickly express my support of the overall zoning rewrite initiative and the Richmond 300 plan. I am concerned that the proposed zoning map isn't living up to the aspirations of the Richmond 300 plan. I think too much of the current density is concentrated in areas that have historically been redlined and underfunded and that don't have enough green space as is. I think that overall we're embarking on a shared path towards a more prosperous future. So I think it's important that every neighborhood in the city does its part to offer more diverse and denser housing options to create a more vibrant community. Certainly, we don't need skyscrapers on every street corner, but even simple things like mixed-use zoning and more missing middle housing like duplexes and ADUs by right is critical to ensure that our future development is sustainable and affordable. We're dealing with a problem that's fundamentally about supply and demand. I don't think anyone here thinks it's a good idea to make Richmond crappier in order to lower demand. Therefore, the only real option is to increase supply if we truly want to lower costs and increase affordability. So I hope that we can continue to tailor the zoning to allow more mixed uses and mixed styles of housing to create more vibrant and diverse communities with plentiful, local, and accessible public green spaces to contribute to that fabric of connectivity and beauty. I think overall we have an amazing opportunity to shape a more prosperous future and return Richmond to its roots of a walkable and medium density connected communities and regain our prior streetcar greatness by focusing the most density along transit corridors. I truly believe we have the potential to create a beautiful city where people can live car free. There is a balance and compromise to be struck, but the current zoning is a bit too cautious and too timid and holds us back from our potential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Willie Hilliard's our last speaker.
Okay, Mr. Hilliard.
Good evening, everyone. I'm gonna make this short and sweet. My name is Willie Hilliard. I am a longtime resident of the city of Richmond, born and raised. I am also a housing affordability advocate. And I have to say, I don't know how much longer I'm gonna be able to stay in the city that I was born and raised in. It is beyond affordable. It has begun ridiculous in the pricing in the city. We can talk about density, and we know we need these things. We need density. We need different plans with SRT, upsizing the whole thing, especially along transit lines, as we've said. But the development that we're seeing is in the poorest, most impacted neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that I grew up in, the neighborhoods that I live in and I work in every day, that I barely recognize them now. Yet the most wealthiest neighborhoods in this city are never touched. All I ask is that you consider the people, consider us, the fabric of this city, who continue to hold this city us, the working class of this city. I ask that you consider us when you do these zone refresh, because these are the people who are being left out, and the people who really can afford these actions are not being impacted. Again, I ask that you consider the people, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else online?
I don't see anyone else with their hand
So I'm going to close the public comment period. Thank you for everyone that took the time to offer comments. So with that, we're going to move into a council recap and meeting introduction from Marianne Pitts.
Thank you. Marianne Pitts, Department of Planning and Development Review. Last meeting, we also had a great amount of public comment, which was valuable as we look at the zoning map. And there was a discussion of regarding all the zoning advisory council members' comments on the map. And so it was looking at what direction we went. And that's what we did at the last meeting. And in between the last meeting where we had our open houses. So LaToya is going to go into, today we're going to go into some detail about some general high level feedback, initial look at some of the posted notes that we received. And then we're going to move on to introduce the development standards. With the development standards, we're going to provide what they are and then conversation. It's a lot of questions asking you all, what do we want to prioritize as we look at these development standards? Really quickly though, I did want to share more for the public in addition to you all. Let me share my screen. On the Code Refresh website, just right before this meeting, we have uploaded, previously we've uploaded our boards and PDFs of all the documents. We've uploaded them now in an interactive format. So if you go onto the Code Refresh website, you'll be able to access a map where you could click. Oh, look, Chris Alexander has already found it for us and provide comments on parcels and see other comments. You'll go over here, you'll click the add button, or yeah, click the add and then click on the parcel which you want to look at. When you click on a parcel or scroll over a parcel, you'll be able to see what the zoning is. And over here, you can access the regulations. You can search by address. There's also a measuring tool if you're interested. Down here, you'll see all the districts. So, and if there's any issues, just email us because we're still working, making sure there's no bugs to it. So just let us know how that works. And then also, the regulations are on our Conveyo website, which also allows you to provide comments. So you'll see, let's go down. This draft zoning districts, first document we had to break into the rules of interpretation, and then the draft use provision. So those are all online. If you're signed up on our website, I'll be sending out an email tomorrow morning with access to these links. But if you want to go to the Code Refresh website, they are up right now.
Anyone have any questions for Marianne? Okay, do you want to roll into the working group update?
Yes, and I'm going to go a little quicker than originally intended on this because I know we have a lot on the agenda. Just wasted time saying that. The working groups, as you all know, they were here to advise the Zoning Advisory Council staff and the consultant team. We're having them look at materials created for the code refresh process, determine what's missing, inconsistent, and just provide a subject matter expertise that a lot of the members of our working groups provide to us. So far, we've had 5 working group meetings. It's all to look at this module 1 content. Our high quality places group met twice, so that's why we've had 6 working group meetings. I apologize, met twice, so that's why there's an additional meeting. And so each meeting, we provided a presentation on what's in module 1 and then discussion questions in small group. We've had 134 individuals participate over all of these meetings. This is a photograph from one of our housing working group. I'm going to briefly summarize what we heard. If you go online, you'll see all of the comments that were at each group. I just want to encourage everybody to go online and look at those because there's a lot and a lot of different perspectives and people spent a lot of time working with us. So it was hard to get to summarize this. So it may not represent everything in 2 bullet points per question. The first high quality places question meeting that we had, we talked about a unit configuration. So if we're allowing duplexes in an ADU, what's the appropriate arrangement of units, 1 structure or 2, how they're laid out on the property. In general, there were still conversations whether we should allow for 2 units in an ADU. And in addition, a lot of the discussion was about maintaining the character in whatever design comes forth or whatever is permitted, maintaining character of the existing neighborhoods. The next question was regarding how we allow for commercial in these residential districts. A lot of the concern was recommending not to allow in the residential detached by right commercial, maybe through a conditional use or another process. And people were comfortable with the limitations on the residential attached, but suggested maybe also further limited to major corridors or corners, and regulating noise, hours of operation, signage, and types of businesses. We discussed height in some of our micro nodes and neighborhood nodes, and how we transition from residential areas to mixed use areas. In general, the comments were that we should respect what the general character of the surrounding residential and step up from there. And there's a definite need for transitions. A lot of the conversation wasn't just about the micronodes. We also talked about the corridors with some of our West Gray Street friends about how we transition on Broad Street. So transitions is something that came out of that discussion. We asked a question about the window requirements. It was really in the weeds of the document. This meeting, we didn't really get to that, and nor that maybe it was the right question to ask people, but in general, people were supportive of minimum window requirements. Our inclusive housing working group was the next to meet. One of the things in the ordinance that we're not looking to continue on is this definition of family to regulate occupancy of a dwelling unit. So we discussed with them how should the zoning ordinance be the tool to regulate occupancy of a dwelling unit. And if the current limit is 3 unrelated individuals, should that be continued on? Should that be modified? Or should that not be included in the zoning ordinance as it's currently proposed? Most in this group saw it could provide for additional housing opportunity if occupancy was just regulated by the building code, the fire code, or health and safety requirements. And if regulated, it should be by square footage, not a definition of family. The residential cottage district is another one of our districts that could be a tool to provide housing in a different format, but did we get everything right? What are their thoughts on this district? Again, this working group saw this as an important tool for providing affordable housing, but had questions about what the standards are and whether there be some changes. So additional work on this district is recommended. Thank you. The special needs housing, so our transitional housing, our emergency housing, it's allowed in more districts. So the working group discussed their thoughts on this change and whether different use standards for different districts should be implemented. The housing working group, which had a lot of experts in the field of housing and housing affordability, supported allowing it in more districts, but recommended a deeper dive on the use restrictions that were updated maybe 4 years ago. But some of the people who participated in that process thought that it was almost more of a Band-Aid and we need to take a deeper dive on that. So we're gonna meet following. And then the group living was another districts that were discussed, and questions regarding the definitions, and a lot of people supported allowing it in more places, but recognizing if there was even a need to differentiate between these districts. Thriving environment, we asked them to look at some of our rules of interpretation, our new definition of how we looked at building coverage. A lot of members of this group thought that we should look more at impervious surface limitations rather just building coverage definition, or incentivize reduction in impervious surfaces. Our amenity space definition has also changed in the proposed rules of interpretation. Members of this group appreciated it because it encouraged more pedestrian level accessible amenity space, but recommended that the space should be required to be safe, accessible, and not hostile. With this group, we also got into some of the uses, the agricultural use, recommending that we don't limit the ability to sell in urban gardens and allow for greenhouses and growing systems in more districts. And there was discussion on how we restrict animals in some of these agricultural districts, agricultural uses. Utility services, most of the conversation was regarding making sure we allow for solar, and energy storage facilities should be addressed. Wireless communication, there was a need for standards. Waste related, the main focus of that conversation was encouraging composting. Again, these are really summarized in the summary, so I encourage you to read. Our equitable transportation, sorry, I have a cold that I'm just barely getting over. So our equitable transportation working group was presented with a lot of maps and asked the question, how should this influence the zoning ordinance? The major streets, people thought that there should be less auto-oriented. Great streets, we should have some pedestrian elements incorporated. Greenways, there should be this trail-oriented development with bike parking. Transit network, higher density around stops, and the high injury network, again, more pedestrian amenities. Vehicle-oriented uses, conversation about how these should be allowed and permitted. The main focus was limiting the entrances and accesses and potentially limiting number of pumps and bays. And various thoughts about which districts should be allowed. They were all over the place in this conversation. Diverse economy, there's a lot of square footage breakdowns in the use matrix. So we were hoping to get people in the room that really understood what the market called for. And we did, but we recognized we need more people in the room that had more expertise in this. So our economic development team over at the Department of Economic Development is helping pull together a group of additional experts. So look at these numbers to make sure the breakdowns and the different types of industrial make sense for, and all the different uses make sense for our market. So they're helping us press that one. For the market demand question, we were just really like, has the zoning ordinance gotten in the way of something that wanted to be here? We're recommending elimination. The recommendation came to eliminate the floor area requirement, not ratio, not rations, and the incline plane to encourage corporate headquarters to allow for some bigger buildings where we want those. Bringing residential density to encourage retail corridors, and exploring the institutional uses, which I still think is one of the zoning districts we probably have to dive into more as well. And then allowing for co-working spaces and pop-up ready spaces. The CG4, this commercial general district, the question was asked, what do people think of it? Will it be used? Where should it be used? People in general in this working group thought it should be a district to remain and support some existing businesses. But even if it was zoned for a big box development, even if we zone something for something more characteristic of a grocery store, doesn't mean it's going to come. And then we met again with the High Quality Places Working Group. We brought back the same question regarding the residential cottage districts. And again, this group of people said pretty much the same thing, that they see it as a good tool. We really need to get a little bit more in the details of what the standards are, and they had some more recommendations of how those standards could be modified. We talked about whether we should allow for alley development and what kind of requirements should be in place. There was a discussion whether to allow by right or through a special use process, and the groups were kind of mixed. I think more leaning towards requiring it to go through some sort of process if it's alley development. Conversations around different types of alleys may accommodate different levels of alley development. But there were still some concerns about parking, trash, stormwater, and the existing condition of alleys and the width of alleys to accommodate alley development. This was more of a general question, like, what are your thoughts on setbacks and how can we accommodate some of the streetscape things that we want to see if we're already in a built-out environment? People were really supportive of the existing range, requiring that, which we have in the ordinance, but also requiring some setbacks for some of the commercial and mixed-use districts, and allowing for these streetscape elements within setbacks, and more details in the detailed notes. And then we talked about building articulation and how do we allow and what kind of requirements we would like to see in the zoning ordinance. Everyone was generally supportive of having some requirements for building articulation, but a discussion regarding having them lower on the building than we typically see in some zoning ordinances. And having a threshold for when articulation is required. Again, those were summaries of summary. So I recommend going online as we take a look at the draft document, as we make recommendations. There's some questions that were asked of these bodies that haven't been asked before of the advisory council. So we want to bring back those discussion topics as well. Working groups are going to meet again when we have more of the content for module 2, go over that content and provide you.
Anyone have any questions for me? Well, I think then, thank you, Marianne. We will turn it over to Latoya Thomas from Brick and Story, who will give us some feedback on the June open house.
Latoya, do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, if you can, that would be great. Thank you, Renee.
All right. Can you see this?
Yep, I'm
Great.
good.
Okay. So.
Great. So I'm going to walk through a couple of slides we've prepared. So many of you are aware that we had open houses at the end of June. So can everyone hear me?
Yeah, it's not very loud on our end, Marianne. Is there a way Bear with us for just a second, Latoya.
No problem. Take your time.
Latoya, will you speak now?
Yep. How's that?
Better, thank you.
No problem. So I want to walk through a couple of slides. As I mentioned, you've all are aware, many of you attended some of the open houses that we had at the end of June. In addition to that, we had several other engagement events that were happening behind the scenes as part of the release of Module 1. So I want to do a recap of the end of June, as well as some earlier engagements that we had leading into Module 1. I also want to highlight, as Marianne noted, some of our very, very high-level takeaways. And just so everyone is aware, and you'll see this on this first slide, our team at Brick and Story has read through every single one of your 686 sticky note comments that came in through the 3 open houses. We have read through them, we have synthesized them, we have organized them, we have now since passed that data off to Code Studio and the city to also take a deep dive into. So there's going to be deeper analysis going into those comments. But I want to highlight that now because this is a very brief slideshow. We are, for tonight's purposes, pulling out the very high level themes that we've heard. First off, let's just talk about what these events were. So the last week of June, we had we kicked off the week with a panel discussion and then had our 3 open houses. Many of you attended those. We had panel discussion on the Tuesday evening at Main Library. Wednesday, we had Southside Community Center open house, Thursday morning in City Hall, and then Thursday evening back at Main Library. In total, we had around 200 people who came to all of the open houses and the panel discussion. Definitely the most attendance that we've had throughout the entire process. So for those of you who did make it, thank you for coming out. If you did not have a chance to attend, please go online. As Marianne noted, the boards from the open house are there and online, as well as the interactive map, which is now online. Next slide, Renee. So we also had other events going on that week, as well as leading into that week. As I mentioned in other ZAC meetings, as well as just throughout the course of this process, the open houses are one tool that many of you come to, but we also know those are not a lot. They're not going to be the primary tool for reaching a lot of populations who may not traditionally be civically engaged, may have concerns about being civically engaged, may not be able to access the events because of time of day. And so we look for creative ways to actually tap into those networks and those populations to reach folks throughout other parts of the city. Some of those events that we've done over the last several weeks have included the Multicultural Festival on June 14th, the Sacred Heart Latino Festival on June 27th, so this was right after the workshops, and then also a pop-up at the Finance Festival Life Church on, sorry, that's actually a typo, Saturday, June 28th. Between us and our team at Avicor, we had staff at all of these opportunities with city partners to share information about the code refresh process, to share the new map, and to also get feedback similar to what we were asking you during the open houses. Important things I want to flag about these events. As you can see, we also talked to almost 200 people just in the course of the pop-ups as well. So we were really able to reach a lot of folks, particularly in Southside, who were not coming to the open houses, maybe didn't even know about the process. We also were able to reach a lot of our target populations, including African-American residents, and in particular, Latino, largely Spanish-speaking, limited English-speaking populations. I do want to give a very special thank you and kudos to Yanina, one of the ZAC members, who was kind enough to get on a Zoom with us and talk to us about some outreach opportunities in Southside, and that's how we actually ended up at the Life Church for their Finance Fest. So thank you again to Yanina. I also want to encourage other ZAC members, as I have in the past, and I'm going to do so again today a little more aggressively. We are working to try to partner with you throughout this process. So if there are events in your community, whether it's through your job, through your house of worship, through other associations that you would like for our team to actually engage with in order to particularly tap into underrepresented populations in this process, please reach out to us. More than happy to have a conversation so we can do something similar to what we did as part of this, this round. Next slide, Renee. We have also been doing and continue to do throughout this process roundtables. I'm going to walk through a couple of the roundtables that we've done so far. Some of these roundtables, which you could call them focus groups, but they are more targeted group convenings, again, to try to get in front of folks who might not be aware of the process yet and who may not have come out to our larger open houses to date, but it's really important to get their input in this process. Between May and June, we've hosted 4 roundtables. 2 of those have been roundtables that our team has worked with the city to organize, including a virtual one with Home of VA and an in-person roundtable with Virginia Community Voice at the Bellmead Community Center that we actually hosted that one while we were still in town after the workshops. The other 2 roundtables that we've completed, if folks remember, we have a community ambassador program. And as a reminder, we had 12 or 13 individuals sign up to express interest in being ambassadors. So we've been working over the course of the last 6 months to get those ambassadors onboarded and also get them teed up to implement the roundtables with groups that they're interested in engaging. We've done 2 of those roundtables successfully so far. One of our ambassadors co-hosted a roundtable with us at the Boys and Girls Club in Southside with teenagers, which if any of you have teens at home, you know that is a very, very special population. But they have a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas, particularly as they think about their future in Richmond. And then we also hosted, while we were in town with another ambassador, a roundtable with African-American realtors and developers, largely from the Fixed District, and we hosted that at Pig and Brew. We have an upcoming virtual roundtable with YIMBY. I believe that's coming up in another 2 weeks. And we are working to continue to schedule more roundtables as we move throughout this. Next slide, Renee. I want to dive a little bit into the open house feedback specifically that we heard. And again, this is very high level takeaways. There'll be some deeper analysis coming in the coming weeks. High level overview of what we heard. I think no surprise, especially to those of you who are in the room for any of our workshops, there are a wide range of views in support and opposition to the zoning code update. And I think some of you have gotten a sample of that tonight during the public comment period. So we know that many of you are in support, many of you are opposed for very specific reasons, and many of you maybe are somewhere in the middle, feel that the code could be going further, maybe feel it's going too far. Another key theme that we saw in your comments from the open houses were general agreement that transitions between zones are needed, particularly when thinking about those lower residential density zones and how you're transitioning to higher level density in those areas. There was also a fair amount of interest in micronodes with improved transportation and connectivity access. We also saw a lot of interest in design overlays for certain neighborhoods, including commercial overlays as well. So we saw a number of mentions around different forms of overlays. Some of that will be addressed later in module 2, particularly around the design overlays, but just want to flag that we did see a number of comments specifically around design overlays and commercial overlays. Next slide. So my last slide, I want to highlight just a couple of areas. These are areas where you all have expressed concern or we saw tensions and disagreement in the comments. Areas of concern that were raised, I think we've heard some of these tonight as well, protection for historic neighborhoods. Also concern around loss of green space, tree coverage, and the natural environment, particularly where looking at increases in lot coverage as we think about what the zoning code is going to do in terms of setback changes, lot coverage changes. We also saw differing views and areas of conflict around 2 major issues. The approach to setback. Some people argue that setbacks that are being proposed are too narrow, don't leave enough unbuilt space on a lot. And then others argue that setbacks should actually be eliminated entirely. So again, we're kind of seeing two schools of thought there. And then also related to the mixed use zoning districts. I think we've heard some comments, particularly on those mixed use zones this evening. Definitely differing views around lower density versus higher density zones and where they're located throughout the city. I will say there was a general consensus, though, that commercial, particularly small scale neighborhoods serving commercial and certainly grocery in certain parts of the city is needed. So that was acknowledged in a wide range of comments, but there's definitely still a lot of tension between lower density and higher density mixed use zones. I believe that's my last slide, Renee.
Thanks very much, Latoya.
Thanks, Latoya. Renee, before we jump to yours, I just presentation, I want to see if any of the that has questions. Can I have one thing regarding the engagement that I just wanted to share in addition to all the engagement that Latoya described? Staff has been going to civic associations as well as civic associations have asked staff to attend and we're available, continue to be available, especially to introduce the map online where people can provide their little comments. So in addition to the roundtable discussions and all the different meetings that you'll see here, there's a further list of civic associations. So PDR staff is reaching out to organizations that are typically participate in our processes, while Latoya's team is focusing a lot more on populations who typically don't come either to the big meetings or have an established civic network. So there's additional outreach and engagement that has been the past throughout the whole project as a part of this as well. We can get you a list of those civic associations. And also if you're as a member of the ZAC, I know Maritza did this when the open houses were coming up, if you attend your own civic association, sharing where the information is available is always helpful. Any members have any questions?
This is Eric. I do. I'm just wondering if for community engagement, is there any kind of data collection for engagement in terms of demographic information, income, any other kind of information you're collecting about your touches with the public?
So we are collecting, apologies if you have any background noise on my end. We have, at all of our events, we have sign-in sheets. We are using the same sign-in sheets, which collect, and Marianne, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not looking at the sign-in sheet, but we are correcting race, ethnicity. I believe we're collecting either housing tenure or household income. Obviously address, contact information. If you are, you live in the city versus work, go to school. Marianne, am I forgetting anything?
Yeah, we are not, we have not been collecting housing income, just
We've not been doing just tenure. And the other is that we've been tracking that throughout the entire process. For folks who have not read our kind of the phases 1 to 4 engagement report, you'll see some of the tracking of that data from those phases in that report. And we're continuing to track, and we'll obviously consolidate all the information throughout the process. The one thing I will flag is, and we saw this in particular with the at the Latino Fest, and this should not be a surprise when I say this, we did manual head counts, and our team obviously did some more qualitative data collection for obvious reasons. Most of the population that we spoke with didn't want to sign their name or provide contact information. And so in those circumstances, because we don't require sign-in, we do track manually in other means just to make sure that we're keeping an accurate track. But that all does get tracked into a master database that we have, so we can actually run analysis on demographics and trends.
Thank you. Eric, did you have any further questions?
And just if the ZAC would be willing to allow for this, if we could have just kind of general updates about, how that is going in terms of, is it representative of the city? If it's skewing one way or the other, it would just be great to understand as this process goes along, if there are issues, if there are other different groups we need to reach. Certainly the ZAC would love to hear about that. I would hope.
Yeah. And I'll let me respond to that quickly, actually. And thank you for bringing that point up. I will be very frank, which is part of why I emphasized the partnership we want to have with the ZAC and the ZAC members in this process. I anticipate that we are going to continue to see the bulk of our engagement, particularly with some of the harder to reach populations, as we continue to do pop-ups and as we continue to do these roundtables. I think we're going to continue to try to push people to the open houses as best as we can. And we encourage the ZAC members to not only attend all of the events, but also to invite people in your communities. And we are relying on the various networks that everyone also has to be able to promote and encourage other people, because this is a community effort. But I anticipate we are going to be continuing to use the roundtables and pop-ups and other devices like that, specifically to try to reach those populations. We've not run a full numbers analysis yet to your point, Eric, just in terms of the last tranche of events that we've done. We've not run a full demographic analysis yet, but what I do know from a high level is that we are certainly seeing a shift in our trends, particularly of residents of color, particularly of non-English speaking households, because of the incorporation of those other events aside from the open. And that's what we're going to be continuing to focus on this week.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Creedle, did you have a question?
A question and a comment. Latoya, thank you so much for your presentation. First of all, as one that does not have a large zoning background, to be able to see the presentation, to be able to see it clear like that was helpful for someone like me. So I want to say thank you for that. First of all, my second question, I also wanted to comment on, I would definitely be willing as a consultant as well to send some a list of organizations or events that are happening in the city definitely this summer that I think will be helpful for you all to be able to be a part of. I think that's great. And then let me see here. As you all were navigating these pop-ups, were there, besides what you already shared, were there any other concerns or any other trends that came up that us as the ZAC team need to know about that you think that we should be more aware of?
Sure. I'm going to comment kind of broadly between the pop-ups and the roundtables that we did. And we're still going through some of that data, but some of the things that I know that we heard, I think, and some people have expressed it tonight, there's obviously a lot of questions around affordability. And again, thinking through what else has to happen from an affordability provision standpoint as the zoning code gets updated, as the potential for more density happens. How do you preserve or create affordability, particularly for existing residents and for future residents? From homeowners who we spoke with, and I'm saying this particularly for some of the roundtables that we did, certainly a lot of interest, and I'll say in Southside, because that's where a lot of our focus has been, a lot of interest in density opportunities, particularly with homeowners who have some land, who have a lot that might have yard space where they can do some kind of expansion. For folks who may have owned their home now for 20 or 30 years and are having very real concerns about their ability to age in place. And some who we even spoke with who are thinking to themselves, you know, if I can actually stay in my home and create a housing opportunity for someone else, whether it's in my family or otherwise, I'm really interested in exploring how I can do that. Obviously, related questions around if the zoning code gets revised to allow for that kind of development, then what are some other city policies and programs that can be created to also help encourage it? Whether that's grant programs or more streamlined approval processes. And that's kind of a part 2 conversation, but we definitely had questions around that. So like once you change the zoning code, how do you then also create the pathways for folks to be able to do that, particularly in places like Southside, where they may have the land, they may have the asset, resources might be a bit tighter. So those are some of the kind of key themes just off the cuff, but we're going to do a deeper dive as well on the roundtable and type of themes that we heard, and be able to share some more of that with you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Latoya. Great job.
Yeah, and I will definitely reach out to Marianne to get connected with you by email so we can do a Zoom and talk about some organizations and events that you have in mind.
Okay.
Maritza Peachin here. How long will the map and Conveyo be up for public comment?
September 10th today, so allowing for 2 months and allowing for like the entire summer in case people are.
That's great. September 10th. Excellent.
And Marianne, if I can actually add in real quick to that question, Maritza, something that we've recently started talking with the city and Code Studio about, and we kind of saw this coming out of our pop-ups and particularly the roundtable series, is we are going to be working with the team to design some kind of an informational webinar that's a bit of a like map 101, how to do this, how to walk through it, just making sure that folks know how to do this and use this tool. And then also some virtual office hour style events where we'll be able to also talk to folks. And I think particularly folks who we may have been talking to already who are just coming into the process, this includes people like our community ambassadors. We just did a bit of a debrief call with them where we did a preliminary walkthrough of the map with them so they could see the tool and be able to talk to other stakeholders about it. We're trying to think about some virtual convenings that we can also have throughout the summer, the early fall, to make sure that folks don't just know the map is there, but also are able to have a way to ask questions or to kind of workshop if they need some help understanding how to navigate it.
That's great that you're planning on doing that. It's Maritza again. Is there one thing that would be particularly helpful to me is if there was like an email template of like that each one of the advisory council members could like forward to their friends and families or whoever they're people that they know. That's like, hey, this is what you're looking at. This is what you need to provide comments on by when, just so that we're speaking with the correct voice that the city wants us to. I mean, obviously we can edit it, but at least we know what the messaging is. I think that would be really helpful and could encourage zoning committee members to easily reach out to people they know.
Yeah, we'd be happy to prepare some content for you and send that over.
Mr. Mai, I think you have your hand raised again.
Yeah, sorry. With the open houses, are the consultants or the city, and with affordable housing just kind of being a priority topic among many people, is there kind of any communication or education being done around how zoning impacts affordability at all? I think that connection there isn't always easily communicated or understood by the general public. And so, there are things like lot sizes or setbacks that certainly impact affordability. And so, I think that would be really impactful to do. It would really help, community members understand what changes to the zoning code would actually do for affordability if they're made. And so just wanted to ask that question. I think, I don't know, Madam Chair, I feel like you've talked about this before in your role. But I think there's certainly other folks and experts that can also talk to the ZAC about this as well, so that everyone is understanding of how zoning impacts affordability.
If I could maybe just say
Renee,
one
do you
thing
want
to
to
that.
take that one?
Yeah, I'll just I was going to say, yeah, we do have, I'm not sure if you remember, Eric, we actually have an economic consultant on the team who was involved in doing some testing for us way back last year. So I think it's likely we're going to end up engaging him again now that we've refined the zoning somewhat. So I think we can work on some scenarios and do some testing of what the outcomes would be. So I'm hoping that we can achieve that over the remainder of the project.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any other questions? Okay, I have a question, Latoya, before you go, and this is Elizabeth. Looking at the roundtables and the groups that you've reached out to or engaged with, have you been able to engage with any tenant organizations?
So we've not done specific tenant organizations yet. I would say the closest that we've come to that so far was our roundtable with Home of VA, who actually assembled a number of, it wasn't just Home of VA staff, there were also other tenant advocates and kind of housing service providers in the room. And obviously their liaisons to a number of other residents who are, throughout the city who are either in affordable housing or kind of working towards affordability. So that's probably the closest. I don't think we don't have anything scheduled yet with a specific tenant association.
Okay, I think that might be depending on how many were engaged through Homes for virtual event. That might be a good group or organization to tap into, and we can get you some names for that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Anybody else before we move over to Renee's presentation? Latoya, are you all wrapped up?
I think I'm done from my side. Renee, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Latoya.
Thank you, Latoya.
Okay, so we've got under an hour left to go and a lot of slides to go through. So let me just tell you about what I'm trying to achieve today. So I think, as has been said, we've collected many comments, and we're still collecting comments from you on the Module 1 materials. So we'll be revisiting all of that over the remainder of the project, the mapping, the standards, the rules of interpretation, the uses. But for now, we're moving to Module 2. So this is, I'm just going to be introducing the content of Module 2 to you today. This is really about the development standards. And so we haven't actually drafted any materials yet, but what I'm going to show you today is kind of the typical range of topics that development standards cover, just to give you a sense of what that might be. Show you a few examples from other work that we've done, and hopefully get your brief feedback on these as we go through them. The goal is that by the next ZAC meeting in August, we're going to actually have some draft development standards to show you and talk through and discuss. Right now, I think what I would just like to get from you guys is just to kind of, at a very high level, without getting into too many numbers or details, what your priorities are as we go through these. So what your aspirations are and what your concerns are. So are there certain things that have been built that you don't like, that you want to avoid again, that we could introduce new development standards to better deal with, for example? Or whatever other goals you may have that we could achieve with these. So let me go through them. I'm just going to start at the very high level. What are development standards? I think some of you may be familiar with this and others not. Development standards, from our perspective, are standards that are located. They're separately located in the zoning code from districts, so they're in a different part of the code. They can apply to all types of development, or they can only apply to specific sets as outlined. So some of them may apply differently to different types of districts, but they're situated in a kind of more general part of the code. They really are designed to augment the rules established into the districts and provide more general provisions that cover things that just don't fit as neatly into those particular individual districts. And the way that we usually organize them, they fall into the following categories. I'm going to go through each one of these with you in a sec. So mobility and access is the first one, transition and screening, site element screening, fences and walls, landscape and lighting, signs, and affordability is the last one. And affordability is a tricky one. It's a little bit different than all the others, which are obviously about particular aspects of design. I think, as we've alluded to before, you're in a somewhat difficult situation in Richmond where the state only allows you certain tools for affordability. You can't do inclusionary zoning, for example, in Richmond. There's some questions we're still trying to resolve with the city's legal team as to how else we could incentivize affordability with the zoning code. And when I get there in the presentation, I'll show you a little bit more about that. I should just say, though, that these affordability development standards are not necessarily the only way that we can encourage affordability through the zoning code. There's also the possibility, as has been said before, about trying to incentivize different types of housing typologies, again, missing middle ADUs, potentially smaller starter homes and so forth. So there's other ways that zoning can do that other than by affordability bonusing, which is what we're going to be talking about in the context of the development standards. Just put that aside for the moment. I'll come back to that later on. So I'm going to go through these, and again, as I kind of go through each one of these categories, I'm just going to throw it out there and just see if I can get some quick comments from you guys on your first reactions or thoughts in terms of what you want to achieve. And I'm going to have to rely on Elizabeth to help moderate because, again, I can't really see you if you raise your hands. The camera or the view of the room is really small to me. So first of all, for mobility and access, under pedestrian access, so the general goal of pedestrian access related development standards is to seek to improve and facilitate pedestrian circulation between the public realm and individual buildings and development sites, to increase external and internal connectivity in and around development sites, depending on zoning classifications. So it could be different depending on which zone you're in, to establish dimensional standards for pedestrian walkways and entrances. And Richmond generally does have standards for pedestrian walkways within their parking lot requirements within the current code. And they offer certain incentives to improve other types of access within private property. But I would say generally the city takes a fairly light touch to the way that it regulates walkways within private property. I'm going to go through this topic now. Once I get to the end of mobility and access, I'll put it out to you. Another piece here is vehicle access. So again, this is about not parking spaces, but necessarily, but about how access is designed within the site. So seek to essentially minimize conflicts with the public right of way. So you can't have tons of curb cuts everywhere, to maintain sufficient access to parking and to mitigate negative impacts in the public realm by requiring design standards such as driveway spacing standards to help create sufficient distance between adjacent driveways, again, so you don't have a lot of curb cuts or driveways side by side that might disrupt the road, and reducing conflicts with other vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Reducing driveway width standards, reduce driveway width standards to produce walkability in the public realm by reducing pedestrian crossing distances across vehicle access ways. So when you need to cross over a driveway, can we minimize that distance for you? Richmond currently does have standards for parking lot design, driveway design. I won't go into all of them, but we would want to maintain some of that, but we'll want to we may revisit some of the details of it and think about different ways that we could do it. A parking lot design here, so more generally, so in addition to just access driveways and movement of pedestrians, looking about safe, accessible, and visually appealing parking lots, enhance parking efficiency, and also contribute positively to the overall built environment. Establishing dimensional standards for parking spaces and parking configurations, going through different possible options, and also regulating landscape and surface design parking lots to minimize their visual impact and require perimeter and interior landscaping. So we don't have just a complete sea of asphalt. We want to have landscaping incorporated into those parking lots as well. And like I said, Richmond does currently have some standards for parking lot design, but we're going to be revisiting those. Vehicular parking, and this is a kind of maybe a bit of a sidebar here. So I think, as most of you know, Richmond has eliminated its parking requirements, minimum parking requirements that they used to have. This is sort of a trend that many cities are going through nationwide. We have the possibility, and again, this is a question to you guys, of establishing parking maximums. So even if we are not setting a minimum, we could say you can't build more than a certain amount of parking. We could do that in different ways. Sometimes it's controversial to do. We could do that in different ways, and it could be based on area of the city. It could be based on zone. So certain zones or certain areas that are more urban, maybe there's more concern about trying to reduce the amount of parking in new developments. We could also, allow for flexibility depending on the actual type of parking that gets built. So maybe we want to limit surface parking, but we don't care how many parking spaces you build if you're building it in a structured parking lot, in structured parking or underground parking. So there's different ways we could do this if this is something that we decide that we want to pursue. Bicycle parking is another thing as well. So there's both standards for the actual design of bicycle parking spaces, and there can also be requirements for how many bicycle parking spaces you do based on number of units and so forth. Richmond actually does do this. It's sort of a fairly new innovation in terms of city parking requirements. Richmond does this already for developments with 10 or more residential units, I believe, and also for parking decks and garages, essentially requiring that they reserve some space for bicycles. So at the end of this section here, I just kind of throw this out to you guys briefly. Quick reactions to this and any thoughts about your kind of top priorities as we get into mobility and access development standards. And the second point here is kind of the flip side of that. Have you noticed any particular problems with pedestrian or vehicular access or parking lot design that you think need to be rectified that we could introduce development standards to help deal with?
Do we have questions for Renee? Go ahead.
Just one or two quick comments. When we're talking about parking, Richmond does have the amount of little islands you have to put in with number of parking spaces and things like that. They're pretty successful at that. One thing we don't have is thinking of different ways to think of parking lots. In other words, is there a way that maybe some of these islands would be put together to put a larger space, and that space would be a larger green space that would go into a parking lot and be required to put into a parking lot as might be a place where actually people could use it, as opposed to just the idea of islands, although the tree coverage is very important. So that's one just wild thought. And very supportive of reducing driveway widths and access points over sidewalks. So that's really good. And I don't know if there's anything, we're doing it pretty well here also. I think we have interconnectivity also between separate properties. There are lots of places in the city where you can actually cross a property to go to a property in their parking lot cover. So I don't know if that's something that should be thought about. But all this looks pretty good to me.
Thanks.
It's Charlie Minges. Can you explain why you would impose maximum parking requirements if, you know, the market for whatever the development is, indicates they need, a certain number, and what would the maximum limitation be needed for?
Well, I'm not saying that we're necessarily advocating for that or that we will do that, but in general, why some municipalities do it is essentially in areas where there's, you know, high transit access or high density, and we don't want to have a lot of parking. We're essentially pushing the developers to say you can only, you know, build a certain number of parking spaces, even though you would like to build more. Now, I say that's controversial because, you know, the removal of minimum parking standards was really about kind of allowing the market to do what it wants to do with respect to parking. And so this is, you know, kind of going back to trying to limit the market. But I would just say that, you know, all these other types of requirements that we're imposing here through development standards are essentially limiting what you can do or making you requiring you to do certain things. So it's not necessarily different than that. But yeah, it would be, you know, the idea of trying to nudge or push development towards a lower number of parking spaces.
This is Maritza. Just a couple of comments on pedestrian access with dimensional standards for walkways. Just want to make sure that there's flexibility there, because there might be situations where a developer has like a smaller space and maybe it's going to go to a smaller place, and so like you don't really need a really wide entrance, a wide walkway there due to the site constraints. And so as long as there's like flexibility, if that's there. And then on the vehicle access and the driveway spacing, I think it makes sense to make sure that they're not like all ganged up next to each other. The zoning ordinance in one of the districts, TOD1, says you can't have like a driveway entrance on your primary street frontage, which like makes sense on the principal street, but then sometimes it doesn't make sense, and it makes it so that like parcels end up like not really having an easy access point. And so that can be very challenging in development if you have no way to like access your parcel for vehicles. Like, let's say you've built a garage, but you have no way to like actually get the cars there. So I think yeah, go ahead.
So are you talking about like a mid-block situation where there's only one way to get into it? Okay.
Yeah. And so that's just something to think about. And then on the reduced driveway width, I get it. They still need to be like reasonably wide though too. Like so that cars can like get in and out. We had a situation recently where like they were like, oh, a recommendation was to have a more narrow entrance. And then I was like looking at our entrance to our building right now, and I was like, oh, that feels pretty narrow. Oh wait, that's the width we're proposing. So maybe we should just keep it there. And our engineers were like, yeah, you definitely don't want to go more narrow than what you're proposing. So just making sure that there's a balance there. So yeah, and I think it's neat, the idea that David had about combining some of the islands. Like I get it's nice to have trees throughout the parking lot, but yeah, it does seem kind of like sad that you have all these different islands everywhere that are required, but like you couldn't gang them all together and like have a picnic table or something, because you're required to have them every such number of parking spots.
Yeah, that's a cool suggestion.
Couple things. One of them about how we currently handle driveways in lower density residential areas. It's the point of much consternation in a lot of the single family permitting that I do, wherein, you know, more outskirts part of the city, there's not going to be an alley, and you're going to build a house and there's going to be a driveway in the front yard. Just so happens like that's the case, right? We have a requirement now, and I can understand it in a more urban context where you can't have a driveway wider than 9 feet in the front yard should you not have alley access and you need a driveway. it turns into kind of like this. You can imagine a homeowner being told that from their contractor, and to get our permits issued, like that's what's done. But who's to say what the homeowner does after that? They might do something else, and then they create a zoning violation. So just adding some nuance to allow for those situations, like 9 feet on a driveway off of Cherokee Road might actually create a dangerous situation because you can't escape Cherokee Road quickly enough, for instance. So whataboutisms for sure, but just something to keep in mind. The other thing, I was looking to find it, some districts, and maybe this is another locality that I'm thinking of, if you're doing something like creating a public plaza, if there's a way, like say you've got a corner property and you could do 6 stories by right, just straight up, but hypothetically, if there were some incentive to create a more public realm situation at that corner and allow for an additional story as like a trade-off or something like that. I don't know if this is the place to talk about that, but if we're interested in enhancing our public realm through the private zoning police power, that's one way to, I think, maybe incentivize that or make it a little more interesting from a developer's perspective.
Yeah, that could be done. I would put that into the category of one of the other ones later on. We talk about landscape standards, but.
This is Charlie Minge. Just going back to parking for a minute. Was any consideration given, maybe this doesn't belong in the zoning ordinance, where there's going to be surface parking, to requiring some sort of permeable surface or other, environmentally friendly materials, reduce runoff and everything else that's, bad about asphalt parking lots?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, this is the place for that, to talk about standards for parking lot design. So for sure. Are you saying that is, are you tying that to maximum parking spaces
No.
separate topic?
I mean, they could be related. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of a building issue, but it could also be a zoning regulated through the zoning ordinance as well.
Yeah.
I don't know technologically where we are in terms of being able to do kind of eco-friendly paid parking, but something along those lines.
We are required, this is Dave Johannes, we are required to go through water management every time you have a development. And in the water management, you've got to retain a certain amount of water. And a lot of times the easiest way to do that is through permeable. So, and we're finding in some cases, it's cheaper than putting water systems in to just have permeable. So that's just a backup on that conversation.
Dr. Cradle?
Yeah, Mr. Cradle.
Yes. I am curious, and you may have already thought about this, Renee, but in our city, along with vehicles, we're having pedestrians who are using scooters, who are using bikes, of course, those who are handicapped. Are there ways that we can, and I'm sure you've already thinking about this, to incorporate those into the plans as well?
Give me an example of what you're looking for in terms of the standards.
Right. So, and I guess from my vantage point, I see that our city has now invested in the use of public scooters, for example. And typically, those scooters are like left somewhere in the city. And so they're not places to really park those. And that might be a separate issue, but I'm just in my mind, as we're thinking about parking, and knowing that parking and how we're getting around the city is more than just with a vehicle. I guess I'm asking if we can consider the other ways that people are mobile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would just say, so generally speaking, again, when we're doing these development standards, it's still mostly about private property. So it's not, the way the city designs streets for the most part. So, in terms of allowing for more bike parking spaces or scooter parking spaces within the street or within, city-owned properties like parks, that would be sort of a separate thing. But in terms of requiring, spaces for, like, as we said, bicycle parking spaces, or maybe even scooter parking spaces within private property, we could do that, or create standards for how that's designed, or as we said, create walkways or movement paths through private property that could accommodate those. So we can certainly touch on some of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'm just going to ask quickly the final question about maximum parking requirements. Can we do like a lightning round of thumbs up or thumbs down, or maybe as a concept?
This is Eric. Yeah, I think I would prefer not to put put that in there, but I think it might be suitable in some areas where there is access to public transit, or where there are multimodal options specifically. I think that would help to deprioritize automobile travel in the city if possible. So that's all.
This is Elizabeth. I would not want to see maximums. I think that development community side, they're going to respond to what the market needs. And I don't think we need to put any restrictions or guidance to that effect. I don't think you're going to be in a scenario where someone's going to want to over park. So not sure that it's the right approach. Mr. Cradle?
Yes.
Did you have a question again? Your hand was raised.
Oh, I did not. I apologize.
Okay, just making sure. Sure.
I'm as pro alternative transportation as anybody. I understand the intent of doing that. I don't know if it's worth discussing, to Elizabeth's point. I think slowly but surely, development financiers are understanding that, our use of automobiles will be changing in the future. I don't know if it's worth the fight right now, honestly.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next topic, unless somebody else has a comment. So this is probably the other big one, and we talked about this one before in different forms, transition standards. So I'm going to go through a few different approaches to transition and screening. So generally speaking, transition standards, and I think we talked about this before, they encourage a wide range of development, varying in mass and scale, while helping to ensure compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, leveraging tools like building setbacks, upper story stepbacks, and landscaping to help improve landscape transitions, offering property owners multiple options based on the development intensity or zoning classification. And currently, I would say Richmond uses incline planes in some places to transition building heights between specific districts or categories of districts. We're generally not that enthusiastic about incline planes, and maybe I should just explain what that is. It's like an imaginary diagonal line, essentially, that you have to kind of keep your building underneath, starting usually from the adjacent property line. So if you have a mixed-use property, and let's say in a typical situation, you're backing onto a residential neighborhood, there would be a kind of an imaginary diagonal line that you have to fit underneath. What we kind of prefer, which is, I think in some ways amounts to the same thing, but it just in terms of communication, it's a little bit different, is a combination of different standards, like you see on the right here, and I'll show you a few different ways we could do it. So one of them is depth. I know this is a little bit hard to see here, but where it says A in the drawing here, there's basically a sort of a minimum setback, which maybe typically would be more extensive than the normal minimum setback that's built into the zone. So when you're mixed use or whatever zone abuts a low-rise neighborhood, you'd have to have a especially large setback. There would also be some sort of transition screen requirement, which could mean a wall or a fence, or it could mean a landscape buffer that essentially says that you have to put that in that space, that setback space. That's where it says A in the drawing. Where it says B and C, you're limiting the maximum height, and then you're establishing a step back after that height. So that basically means that in this case here, your building can only be 3 stories high, and then you have to step it back another 10 feet, and then you can go further up. So again, it's, if this was a really tall building, there might even be more than one step back. We could say at, different story heights along the way, you have to basically do an additional step back. But the idea here is trying to, again, to avoid the overshadowing or just kind of being out of scale with an adjacent low-rise neighborhood. me just take you through a few more slides here. This is some quick kind of renderings that we whipped up during the open houses. These are not showing any particular dimensions, but just sort of the concept of transitions here. So this is a situation where you don't have any alleys, but you've got a mixed-use property abutting a neighborhood. And so the one on the left is kind of what we don't want to see. So even though that might be zoned for 6 stories, we don't want you to go straight up to 6 stories right on the property line like that. We want you to have some sort of transition like we have on the right. And again, the details of that transition are what we're going to be trying to work out. And then if you had an alley in between, there'd be a slightly different standard associated with that would kind of take into account, that little buffer that already exists there. So the bad example on the left and then the good one on the right. Now, details of that still to be determined, and it may be determined based on different sort of types. So usually we have the idea of a kind of a table where we have different types of zones that interact with each other. So, and there's usually a few different options for transition standards. So depending on what combination of zones we're talking about, there might be a different standard assigned to you. So this is just an example taken from the Durham, North Carolina code that we were working on. And again, it might be different here in Richmond, but just to show you some examples here, type A is just more or less a straight up but large setback requirement and a high screening requirement. So this is in a situation where there's industrial districts next to other districts. So in this case here, there's got to be some sort of fence or wall and lots of landscape because industrial districts are usually pretty short. We're not talking about stepping here. Type B is where we have commercial districts next to lower intensity residential or mixed use districts. There's a lesser setback requirement, a moderate screening requirement. And again, these are lower intensity, like 3-story districts, so there's no stepping. Type C is where you've got multi-story or mixed use or commercial districts next to lower intensity residential, so taller buildings. And so here's where we introduce the stepping as well as the 15-foot setback and transition requirement, screening transition requirement. So in terms of what that screening might look like, I'm not going to read through all of these, but just to show you a few of these images here, there's a range of different possibilities from lower to higher intensity, and it relates both to the type of vertical structure that's there, wall or fence, and also the type of landscape. So it goes from modest landscaping to really deep, extensive landscaping. And then the other part of this is frontage screening. So this has all been previously we've been talking about transitions. So this is where you've got, again, the back of your industrial property or gas station or whatever touching on the neighborhood. This is more like the front side. So if you've got some sort of heavy industrial property, might apply in some cases to certain types of large commercial, but I think mostly we're talking about industrial, where you're actually trying to screen the view of it from the street as well. So this is sort of on the front side, requiring some sort of landscape buffer and potentially a wall or fence that screens off, again, your vehicle storage area or other types of heavy industrial use. And then there's also site element screening. So this is particular elements of the built form. So screening off dumpster and recycling areas, roof-mounted mechanical equipment through a parapet so you can't see it from the street, wall-mounted equipment, and also ground-mounted equipment that might relate to, again, things like HVAC or electricity and so forth, just so we don't see that stuff from the street. So discussion here, just thinking here again about particularly about the first transition parts. Any kind of high-level thoughts or priorities from you guys in terms of what sort of elements of transition you really want to see applied? And again, I don't think we're going to be able to go through all these different combinations, but just conceptually what you think about as being the most important here in terms of making that transition between higher intensity and lower intensity districts. And again, for lower intensity, I think we're mostly talking about RD and RA districts under the current draft. And for higher intensity, things like RX, MX, industrial mixed use, industrial light and heavy, and possibly the commercial general as well. So I'll just put that out to you guys.
This is Dave Johanna speaking again. So I think that the idea of the steps is a good idea. I think it'd be beneficial. I think some of the concerns about people looking in their backyards and seeing buildings go up just by seeing that step, that would soften that environment. But also, I can imagine areas where the fronts of buildings would have stepping depending on the character of the district that it's in or the adjacency to a historically controlled district, or at some point in the future, if there are different types of overlays where we're limiting the ability to change heights in an overlay district, where there would be some opportunities to put some protection in on streetscapes also. This is also an issue maybe when the streets get narrow or there are narrower streets, just in terms of light and air coming down, having some step back that goes higher and higher. All for height, but sometimes it'd be nice to get some light down to the ground.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
This is Benny Gates. I just want a quick comment about this stepping. Is it just more visually appealing, or is there really an opportunity for like the homeowners to still have solar energy? Because we don't want to get away from the possibility of converting to solar energy for anyone. Because that's overall is going to make it's a healthier place. So great to bring more people in, but if you're bringing people into an unhealthy environment, then what are we really doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intention is both visual in terms of like, having, a bit of sky view and open space around your backyard if this is your house, but also about, access to sunlight generally as well. So you're not, being as shadowed as you might be, particularly if you were on the north side of a taller building. So yeah, it's certainly the intention is both of those things.
Can we ensure that that's going to definitely be the case? If they do step, you still can use solar energy for the places that are affected by the taller buildings.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the way that you would quantify that.
It might be difficult to ensure. This is Maritza. Sorry, Renee. Like to
No, go ahead.
ensure it, because it really depends on like where the property is and where the new building's going and like the way the sun goes and like is it now more shade? And then like comparing it to like what's allowed now, like if there was a building that was allowed right now that would have cast shade. And then we changed the zoning ordinance and the new building also cast shade. Like, is it even though it's step back? So I mean, like, I think that's a pretty nuanced question to be able to like say like every property will have enough sunlight on it to have solar panels because there's trees and like many other things that factor into how much light.
Yeah, it's tough to say that. It also depends where you put the solar panels. I mean, you could even have, another adjacent, house overshadowing your solar panels, right? Depending on how your house is designed and how tall it is. But I would say, broadly, yes, the idea of transition between a higher intensity and a lower intensity zone will definitely allow for more sunlight on the lower intensity zone. As for exactly how much in every situation, it's hard to say exactly. You could have different standards depending on what side of the street you're on. That does exist in some places, but it's tough when you have streets of, all different angles like you do in Richmond, right?
I'm just in favor of getting, like, looking at different solutions to stepping that don't involve the inclined plane or the reverse inclined plane. Because they're kind of difficult to describe. And you need like math and engineers to help you figure it out.
Yeah, I think.
Triangles.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see that moving, actually.
In defense of shade, I don't want canyons of buildings all over the place, but it is worth realizing in the context of our very hot southern city, the shade that buildings can create. Not always a bad thing. Check my privilege. I was able to go to the south of France last summer, and there were some very hot cities, but when you're walking through these narrow streets with 5-6 story buildings surrounding you, you really don't notice the heat as bad, and the shade that provides is worth something more often than not. I totally understand the thought of not prohibit. I have solar panels on my house, right? My house faces perfectly south. Now, I will say if I lived on West Gray Street, the thought of a building to the north of me blocking sunlight is physically not possible, but that's okay. It could affect other people's ability to get solar panels. I understand that, but shade is not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because everybody's talking about sunlight, but sunlight has huge heat impact in the sun for people who are walking.
Yeah.
So if we have sun on all our streets all the time and we have to walk through those, they're difficult to walk on.
This is Elizabeth Greenfield. I just want to say about the impact. Love to see that eliminated. Do more with transitions.
All right, I can't see, but can I go on to the next slide? You can't tell if somebody else has their hand up.
Not seeing anybody.
Okay. Just going to ask quickly about other types of screening, like buffering, landscaping, and so forth, fences and walls. Any quick thoughts about that or things you feel strongly about? No, I can move on. So to fences and walls, and this is separately in here because this is actually talking about the flip side. So whereas under screening, we were talking about minimum heights for fences and walls, this is more about maximums or design standards for them. So can you put a 10-foot, fence around your front yard? No, you probably shouldn't be able to do that. But what's the balance in terms of allowing people privacy, but also improving the visual kind of conditions of the city? And so there's different types of ways this happens. It happens both along streets, talking about front yards, but also the fronts of commercial spaces. And then it also happens around common lot lines, so backyards and side yards where you have two different houses or other uses abutting each other. So there's design standards that would be in the zoning code that would deal with that, and under development standards. Richmond does currently regulate fence and wall height according to zoning district. I'm going to kind of move ahead, but I can get any general comments at the end, if you don't mind. Landscape and lighting, this is another fairly big one here. So landscape standards, generally speaking, want to try and strengthen the urban ecology by integrating trees, shrubs, and other plant materials into the built environment in ways that elevate the visual appeal, support biodiversity, and ensure longer-term sustainable development. We have the possibility of establishing minimum tree canopy requirements in alignment to a recent bill that just passed in Virginia that allows cities to do this, which is pretty interesting. And I'm going to show you just a couple examples over the next few slides about how that might happen. Richmond currently does have tree canopy and landscaping requirements for parking lots and buffering areas, but not general, sort of as a general rule for different types of lots. So some examples here, and this is pulled out of a code that we did earlier for Rossville, Georgia, where there's quite a extensive tree canopy requirement. So this sort of stuff gets kind of difficult because in zoning, we want to really try and keep things objective. And when you get into trees are just kind of by nature, kind of much more, they're natural things, they're more subjective. So trying to kind of actually quantify some of this stuff is difficult. But if you were doing a site plan for a new development in Rossville, Georgia, they would want you to come up with a landscape plan that would indicate what sort of trees you're planting and which existing trees you're keeping. And there's a tree density requirement that's they call tree density based on where you are in the city. So there's one for downtown, which is lower because it's a harder, more urban condition, and then there's higher ones for as you get out into the suburban areas of the city. And this is just an example here of kind of how it might be calculated. And they essentially, depending on the size of the tree you're putting in, you get more tree density units, and you also get a bonus if you preserve existing trees because we just, even if it's the same size as a new one, an existing tree is kind of inherently more established there. So they're trying to encourage you to preserve those trees. There's also the sort of red buffering line around these, which is a kind of a tree protection area. So when the construction happens and when the new development happens, it has to stay out of that buffering area. So some examples just about how this might happen. In addition to that, there's other streetscape standards associated with landscape. And I think we've kind of touched on this earlier a few times in this process. This is where you actually get into the public realm. And I've said a few times that zoning mostly deals with private property. This one exception here is where we're trying to use private property to somehow augment the public realm. So let's say you're in an area that needs a wider sidewalk and the sidewalk that you have is really narrow, or maybe you don't have a sidewalk at all. In these cases here, this is an example from Charlottesville. They're essentially saying you must meet a certain minimum sidewalk, clear area, and also greenscape area. And so if you can't achieve that with the existing sidewalk, you have to essentially set your building back some more and add that additional space onto the public realm. So as a member of the public, these two drawings in the bottom here, we actually feel the same, but they're achieved in different ways. One of them is on the left is the traditional way with all that sort of stuff in the public realm. And the one on the right is where you're augmenting that with private development. And again, they have a whole series of different standards depending on what kind of street you're on in the city, where, higher for mixed use areas, lower for industrial areas, and so on. Richmond currently doesn't require any of this as built into its zoning. But the city does offer things like bonusing incentives to encourage improvements to the public realm. And then lighting standards here, I'll just say this quickly. This is, again, not about public streetlights, but about private lights that impact the public realm. So zoning can establish standards for those streetlights as well. So, again, the idea is promoting safe and secure areas, accessible areas, in the same way we talk about, trying to promote pedestrian walkways on private properties, and making sure that vehicular driveways work. We want to make sure they're properly lit and that they're safe to use. So Richmond really has only some very general standards right now, but lighting on private property. So quickly for this category here, for lighting and landscape, any kind of high priorities or things that you're really concerned about?
Yes, Dave Johannes, I'm very concerned about providing for trees on our streetscape. And whatever we have to do to accomplish that. If we've got a 5-foot sidewalk out there, obviously we can't put a bunch of trees out there and plant them. So I think we need to do something in our ordinance that provides places to put those trees. I'm not saying it all has to be all setback. We need enough to create enough shade though, that there is a reasonable environment to walk on the streetscape with shade. So leave that up to you to figure that sentence out.
I got it.
3 quick comments on the previous section on screening utilities. That can be pretty tricky. We're trying to, it's just, in summary, it's very hard with Dominion's rules and stuff to be able to screen those things. Second, on streetscape, it would be neat if you could allow a sidewalk if one wasn't provided. If the developer could provide it, through some agreement with the city, provided that there's a bonus density by right, to accommodate make sure that they don't lose the value of the property they're giving away. And then I'm not sure about recommending specific light fixtures in the lighting standards. It might be better to just recommend features, because that's ever evolving. They're always coming out with new light fixtures. So dark sky or whatever type of requirements.
Yeah, I agree.
One more on fences and walls. Streetscape wise, want to be careful about how big our walls are on sidewalks where people are walking, walkable areas. Also, the idea that the lot is very long. There should be breaks in a fence, so you don't have to walk the city block to get around the fence to get to your car that's in the middle of the parking lot. Those are just 2 thoughts. And of course, we want them to look nice.
Thank you.
I feel like the tree canopy thing is warranting of a pretty big conversation, not one that we can have in the remaining time, I don't think, but I do understand the intent, totally understand the intent. I do wonder though, could you shed some light on the enforcement of this? And that could mean, of course, at the pre-construction review phase, permitting, it's, you can put stuff on paper and understand it. But what if, someone a homeowner has a property, they want to do landscaping in their backyard, they tear down trees to do so. Maybe they plant some new trees, who can say, but are they creating a zoning violation? Is this could that, again, whataboutism?
Yeah.
That's an important question, because, the power of our staff is is limited from a, like any city from a budget standpoint. And,
Yeah.
Just during that, I just wonder how.
Yeah. Let's talk about this more during the next ZAC session when we come up with some ideas. Maybe we consider workshop with you guys. It's challenging to do, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are often a little bit reticent to do this, even though we definitely agree with the intent of it. But trying to find a way to kind of make it quantifiable and enforceable is tough. So I guess on the quantifiable side, like I said, trees are inherently, although you can measure their diameter, there's also questions of health and how well the tree has been maintained or pruned, and so forth. So you could have trees that are better than others that essentially have the same diameter, right? But achieve different things in terms of shade. So there's lots of questions there. What happens if a tree becomes unsafe and so forth. I think that we're definitely going to try and pursue this, but we need to think about the details of it and also about the enforcement. And it probably does need to be combined with some sort of tree removal requirement or prohibition that says otherwise, yeah, you could just plant all the trees on day one and then cut them down on day two, right? So there's got to be some requirement that says that you have to, you can't just cut down trees willy-nilly. But in terms of how that gets enforced, if somebody cuts down a tree in their backyard and nobody sees the tree fall, did it actually fall, right? It's a tough thing for the city to enforce.
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question for now.
Yeah.
All right, Renee, you have about 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I'm just about done. I'm just going to go through the last bit of this, and then we'll wrap it up. So signs here, sign standards, I'll just say really quickly. They're basically designed to promote the effective use of signs for communication and attracting business and pedestrian and traffic safety. But we also want to reduce visual clutter in the public realm and establish standards for design and installation and maintenance of signs. Richmond does have sign standards right now. They essentially lay out what types of signs are allowed in each one of your zoning districts. They also have some general provisions. We're probably going to go back over those again and take a look at ways which they could be adjusted. Normally, the way that we do it is we break it up into a few different categories of signs, and we have specific rules for each one. And we say certain signs are allowed within certain districts and others are not. So just some examples here from another code. This is again from Durham. So for building signs, there are signs that are attached to buildings, whether directly on the wall or perpendicular from the wall. These are freestanding signs, so monument signs and bracket signs that sit out in front of the building, and again on very different scales here. And then special signs like ones that sit on the roof, or other types of things like suspended signs. One of the big controversial issues, I think, in sign regulation is what to do about large-scale freestanding signs. So it's like your classic, highway commercial McDonald's signs and things like that. Although they could be smaller, maybe a little bit less offensive than that. I think you have the one on the left here, the monument signs. Any kind of high-level thoughts from you guys about signs, things that exist in the city that you hate today that you want to see resolved, or concerns that you have? Again, I should just say we're talking about signs on private property here, not public street signs.
I feel like signs is a massive topic
Yeah.
that probably requires more discussion than 6 minutes.
We can talk about it more next time. I just wanted to sort of see if there's anything that, like, anything you really, really want to hate that you want to see avoided that we could work into the first draft that we show you next time.
And I know, Renee, you're moving into the last slide, but I think this affordability standard is going to need way more than 3 minutes discussion. So.
Well, let me say, yeah, let me just read this to you, and it may or may not, because I think this is going to have to be paused for next time as well, not just because we're running out of time, but because there's things that we actually don't know right now that we need to find out. So as I was kind of sort of saying at the very beginning here, affordability standards, when they're in development standards, are trying to incentivize affordable housing through some sort of bonus of either height or density or some other type of provision. Right now, we're kind of running into some legal issues in terms of what Richmond can do, and we're trying to figure out what they actually can do. So right now, the state of Virginia only allows Richmond a really narrow opportunity to bonus a specific increase in density for a specific increase of affordable units. It's like a very, very specific thing. And it's not dynamic in terms of the needs of the market. It doesn't, get updated every year, or doesn't, apply differently in different parts of the city. So it's a really, really kind of crude tool, I think I can say. In addition, the code, at least as we're currently drafting it, is proposing to do away with regulating density. So we're talking about regulating heights and other built form elements, but not density anymore. So that also means creates a bit of a difficulty here because we can't bonus density if we don't regulate density, right? So Richmond currently does have a form of density bonusing as well as actually a height bonusing for one specific zone, but it has seen very little uptake so far. Again, because I think that the specifics of these numbers are not actually tied to what the market is looking for. So we've asked the city's legal team to go and take a look at whether there's any flexibility to read into these permissions that might allow us to bonus in a different way, either at different rates than the ones that have been established by the state or in height rather than density. So we're kind of waiting to hear back from them on that. I was surprised that it seems that Richmond may not be able to bonus for height, but it seems like it's a distinct possibility. So if this happens, if the lawyers say we can't do this, there's not a whole lot we can really talk about in terms of affordability bonusing under development standards. We'll have to think about other ways that we can achieve affordability through the code. So that was mostly just a kind of an update to you, and I'm hoping that by the next SAC meeting, we'll hear something back from them and we can give you a kind of a conclusion to this.
Just really quick with that, there's a lot of, understandably, like affordability, the issue of affordability can be equated to the same issue of displacement. And if there are ways that we can, through supplemental regulations, discourage displacement through other geometric permissions that you can get on a case-by-case basis, that might be a tool that we could have in our toolkit without capital A affordability, but instead speaking to the same conversation.
Yeah, so other things that we talked about in other places before have been trying to incentivize the preservation of existing buildings. So maybe there's a possibility of adding more things onto a lot without tearing down the existing unit, to sort of incentivize that retention. There's also, as we talked a lot about before, different opportunities for housing. So smaller lots, sublots, cottage courts, different types of missing middle housing.
Renee, this is Preston Wood.
Yeah.
I had a hand in working with the patron who put in the bill that ultimately led to the creation of section 15.2, 23 of 5.1, which is the affordable density bonus authorizing legislation in the Code of Virginia. And you may want to read a little bit further in that code section, because while it does include a corresponding table of the density bonus that you get for a prescribed amount of affordability that's provided in the unit, I would make the argument that that's also, it's not just density. You could say density equals height, and you could do a corresponding adjustment for height. But even beyond that, section 3 provides that an applicant for a density bonus can also request a waiver of development standards. And there are a number of different categories, one of which is development standards that impact the financial feasibility of a project submitted pursuant to the section of affordable housing. So what does that mean? If you want relief from the setbacks, if you want relief from the step backs, if you want relief from really anything that's prescribed in an element of the development standards in the code, then the city has the ability to create a program that would allow for that special relief to be considered and granted if it's an affordable housing project. And so the idea is, again, create a menu of potential incentives. This is one of them. It's not exclusive. And so I would encourage you to talk to the city attorney's office about whether there may be other ways to come at the same issue.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah. So like I said, we've asked them to take a look at it. So we're waiting to hear back, and we'll chat with them once we get some feedback. So that's helpful.
Hey, Renee, this is Elizabeth. I think things
Right
like,
on.
and there's some of the things that you've noted, I think are going to require much deeper conversations, not just the affordability, but signs and tree canopy. And maybe we can get that first on the next agenda so that we can continue this conversation in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like I said, most of the next meeting is going to be about development standards again, and we'll have some suggestions specifically to put in front of you.
Great. Before we close up, are there any last questions for Renee or anything that you should be thinking about and planning for next meeting?
So can we vote on the meeting notes now?
Yes, I'm sorry. We could go back to the earlier part of the agenda where we didn't have a quorum, so we weren't able to approve the June meeting notes. So, you wouldn't have any questions, and if not, can we get a motion for approving the June meeting notes? So moved. All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting notes are approved. Thank you all. Just note that our next meeting of the advisory council is August 13th, 4 p.m. here in the 5th floor conference room at City Hall. And as Marianne said, the draft zoning map and district regulations and uses are now available on the city's Code Refresh website. If you're signed up to receive emails from this project, you will get an email tomorrow providing you with access. And Marianne said staff would like to get comments by September 10th. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn. Thanks, everyone.